Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartledge. I know that you're here because you want to master your animal training skills using a force-free approach. And to handle the variety of challenges you face, you need a broad knowledge and experience base. The problem is, we all get stuck and hit rough patches in our training, which can leave us feeling overwhelmed and helpless. Our mission since 2015 is to empower trainers just like you. The Animal Training Academy has helped thousands of trainers globally to develop skills, gain confidence, and positively influence both animal and human learners. Here's how we can do the same for you. Sign up for our membership waitlist at www.atamember.com. Register when our doors open email arrives and start growing your training skills. Build impactful training practices benefiting you and those you train. So join the waitlist at www.atamember.com. And while waiting, enjoy this free podcast show. We want to see you avoid embarrassment, overwhelm, and burnout. Instead, we want to see you build resilience to setbacks, get more organized, and grow your training skills and knowledge. In short, we want to see you enjoy confidence in yourself as a trainer and lead a fulfilling life, positively impacting the lives of the animal and human learners you work with. Welcome to another episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. Today, we're diving into a topic that's crucial for all animal trainers, all animal carers out there, and that is caring for aging animals. The challenges, the emotions, and the strategies involved in this journey are unique, and to guide us through this, we have a very special guest. It's my immense pleasure to welcome back to the ATA podcast show, the wonderful Debbie Marrin. Debbie is currently the Director of Training and Behavioral Husbandry at the San Francisco Zoo and Gardens. She has more than 48 years of professional animal training and management experience with a large variety of species and individuals. She was at the forefront of husbandry training in the marine mammal community, starting her first program in 1985 with dolphins. She has led teams in the design, implementation and maintenance of multiple husbandry training programs, training both animals and staff. One of her specialities and passions has become the care and training of geriatric animals to provide optimal welfare for all. Her experiences include both animals she has worked with professionally and her personal animal companions. She's co-authored multiple papers, a book chapter, and done presentations at multiple conferences dedicated to geriatric animal welfare. Debbie, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us again at Animal Training Academy.
You're welcome. Always a pleasure, Ryan. Love the community.
We love having you in the community. And I say again, if you, the listener of the show, haven't listened to previous episodes from Debbie, you're going to have to travel back. I think, Debbie, you were maybe episode number 4 or 5, way back in 1996 when no one knew what a podcast was.
Yeah, I think...
Not 96, 2000.
2017.
2017. I'm way off.
Yeah, I've been training since 1986, but podcast 2017, I think, was the first one.
I remember doing those with you. I was so excited because I just started this podcast and Debbie Marrin wanted to be on my show. And I was absolutely pumped. But I encourage everyone to go back and listen to those earlier episodes that Debbie was super kind to do with us. And you've done multiple things with us within our membership since then, Debbie. But I'm sorry it's taken 5 years to get you back on the show.
Oh, that's okay. We've just all been so busy that finding time and topics, and you have so much good content. You're always busy and full of great information. So I'm happy to contribute.
But there's never end to the amount of things we can talk about because I don't think we have created something specifically on what we're going to talk about today. So I'm really excited about it. For you, the listener, Now, as a trainer, as a carer, maybe you have cared or maybe you haven't cared for aging animals. But I think, regardless of if you have or not, everyone can understand it's a complex stage of life. The unique needs of older animals can sometimes leave us feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and possibly a bit helpless. It's a journey filled with emotions and challenges. Therefore, Debbie, we're pumped that we're creating this episode with your expertise because I know it's going to be invaluable for our listeners. And you've kindly put together for us your top 5 strategies for training and caring for aging animals. So thank you firstly so much for doing this. And could you please get us started with strategy number 1?
You're welcome. Well, let me first start out with saying that all of our animals age, right? And the thing is that they age in different ways. So we're still using all the same behavior science. We're still using all the same ethics that we practice on a daily basis, but we're going to go to another level and look at things that are specific to help us deal with our aging animals to give them the best life possible. So narrowing it down to 5, I have for the first one, be a good observer of your animal's behavior, both in and out of training. So both of these scenarios are going to give us a lot of information about our animal's welfare. And it can also give us some red flags that there might be some health issues underlying that we're not aware of yet, or that there might be some training coming up later on that we might need to do. So when you're observing your animals outside of training, you're going to look for things like, is their weight shifting when they're standing still? Are they less active in their environment? Are you seeing behavior changes? Are you seeing the way they move looks different to you? Are they maybe laying down during the day at unusual times? Are they drinking a lot more water, a lot less water? Is their appetite decreasing? So we're looking at behavior outside of training, and then we're looking at behavior in training. So in the training session, you may have an animal who reliably participates for years in training, and then all of a sudden you start getting latent responses to a behavior, or maybe even signs of aggression during the training session because they're not feeling well. So we know that the behavior speaks to us and lets us know. And if we're having that two-way communication, that's really important. So be a good observer of behavior.
I'm curious if you can share any examples where someone observed something that was abnormal and that led to a new care program or intervention with an aging animal.
Yeah. So one animal that I can talk about that we did changes for inside and outside of training because there was behavior changes in both is I worked with a very old polar bear years ago who was 32 years old at the time. She had a very large habitat with a crossover. And we noticed at one point that she wasn't using half of the habitat, even when we set up a lot of enrichment in there and some of her favorite foods. When we looked at the environment, we realized that she would have to climb up onto a very high shelf and then down, which was difficult for her in her old age. And so we just simply added some extra steps for her on both sides. So getting up and back down made it easier for her. Around that same time, I was contacted by the keepers, and they told me that her name was Pika, and she was born and raised here at the zoo. And she had reliably shifted in her den every morning so that the keepers could give her some breakfast and go out in the habitat and clean and set up enrichment for the day. And then suddenly she wasn't securing anymore. So at first, of course, the keepers were doubting themselves, and they're like, well, maybe it's our training and maybe we're not using high enough value reinforcers. And they tried some different training techniques and they still weren't successful. So they gave me a call and I did a functional assessment and I watched Pika's behavior. prior to shifting and when they were trying to call her in. And so after the assessment, my theory was that we had competing motivators. So though Pika was motivated to come in and interact with her keepers, get her breakfast and her high value foods, she was also in a lot of pain because she had arthritis. And normally in the mornings is when she would get her arthritis medication. But it was so painful for her to walk as the medication was wearing off that she would rather just stay where she was. So what I asked them to try was to put up all of her medication in the fish that we would normally give her in the morning, put it in a little box and go up on the roof. So wherever she was laying in the exhibit in the morning, we would throw the medicated fish to her, let her consume it, and then we would come back in about an hour and a half or more when we thought the medication had taken effect. And then we would recall her and ask her to secure at that time. Once we made that very small change for her, her securing became reliable again. So it just shows you that, pain is a big motivator. Avoiding that pain is the bigger motivator than moving towards the positive reinforcers at her stage of arthritis. So we were really happy to be able to make that change for her.
And for those listening who don't know the natural history of a polar bear, which I'm going to predict would be quite a few people in our listenership, can you share a little bit about what a life expectancy of the species is and how old a 32-year-old polar bear is in relation to our understanding of old animals?
Okay, yeah. So life expectancy for her was expected to be around 25 is what they expect for a polar bear. At the time that I was working with her with this behavioral issue, she was the third oldest polar bear in any AZA institution, and we had one of the other three. So we had two of the oldest polar bears in an AZA institution, far surpassing what you would expect them to live.
Can you think of any times where maybe the influences of old age were missed initially in the program? Because obviously, if you didn't pick it up, you're not going to be able to share a story about it. Because I'm just imagining for those working with an aging animal, and they're seeing changes, and so for those keepers who wanted to shift the polar bear, that was part of the routine of the polar bear, but it was part of their routine of their keeper day. And if you don't know, because if the polar bear is standing in front of you and they're in pain, and you don't know what to look for, that just looks like a polar bear looking at you, doesn't it? But the polar bear is standing again.
So, they're in a back area because, of course, if you're working with a polar bear, you're protected contact. And so they're in the back and they're calling the bear and the bear's not coming to them. So while they're calling, they're not really able to observe the behavior that's happening in the front. And so that's why I was like, let's do the functional assessment. You call her from the back. I'll be in the front observing. And then what I would see is a bear that was open mouth breathing. She would walk a short way and then she would sit down and rest again. And so her movements were slow and a little bit stiff. And she wouldn't go very far before she would want to sit down again. And the way she sat wasn't a normal posture.
And I love that you did that functional assessment. Now, is the tool you used Susan Freeman's functional assessment and intervention design tool, or have you got your own San Francisco tool?
Well, it was not Susan's exactly. I didn't even know that existed at the time. That's just the way that I would go. So I get called in when there's behavioral issues, and I would do my own style of it, which would do interviewing the keeper, looking at the past history, and then observing the behavior. It's very similar in the way it functions as Susan's, but it's not that exact layout.
The reason I ask, and something I only really came to realize myself recently when we did a podcast episode with Susan, on the functional assessment and intervention design form, is the intention of that form being a teaching tool to train the user of it in developing their observation skills, being one of the things that I assume people would take away from using that as a teaching tool, because they're asked to look at antecedents and consequences and distant antecedents and think about these things that might not be at the forefront of their brainstorming endeavors. I'm curious, how do you train in your team at San Francisco Zoo observation skills? They are so important in the area that we're talking about today, but just in general across all species, including us, including humans, developing those
Yeah.
observation skills. How do you build that into your training program for your human learner?
Okay. So we have a lot of resources here. So we have multiple classes for the keepers on both training and enrichment. I have an X Drive where they can access papers written by Dr. Friedman, by Steve Martin, by Ken Ramirez, links to Animal Training Academy podcasts. So part of it is me teaching, part of it is they have to have the motivation to, do a little bit of research on their own. And then there's a lot of conversations and a lot of mentoring in person. So like I said, I'm going to meet with the keepers. We're going to have conversations about that individual animal. I'm going to do observations. Then I'm going to combine all the information that I get from the staff and from my observations, and I write up a summary for everybody, and then we'll have another meeting and discuss it. So there's a lot that goes into it because it is a team endeavor, and sometimes keepers don't see things the same way, or they don't manage the animal exactly the same way because we're allowed to be individuals. So it's just really communication is the important thing, communicating with each other, and helping everybody to keep growing professionally.
Mentorship, I imagine, is something that's really appreciated by keepers in your organization.
I think it's really nice that it's not, like you can call me anytime you want and say, come watch, come talk to me, help me. And so I think it is, in my opinion, and I've been given a lot of thanks from the keepers and, appreciation. And that's my positive reinforcement, along with seeing the animals do better, having the staff appreciate the mentoring that they get is huge.
What is strategy number 2, please, Deb?
Okay, so I have a whole life plan, a whole life training plan. So, we want our animals to participate in their own health care for their whole life. And there's a lot of foundation behaviors that we can teach them that are going to be useful throughout their whole life, right? And so if they have those foundation behaviors that we're using on a daily basis or a weekly basis or as needed, like I know how to shift and go where you want me to, I know how to stand on a scale so you can get an accurate weight. I will hold still for a vaccination or a body scoring or, whatever we need to do for daily maintenance. Then as the animals age and they experience different health issues, and the vet says, we really need this new behavior to treat or diagnose or both a new health issue, that we have a shorter pathway to get to that much needed behavior, right? So if you have the foundation behaviors, every training plan we write starts with what do they know already and what are we building from? And so the stronger foundation they have, the faster we are at reaching that goal for the new behavior specific for that animal's needs.
So you're in a position that a lot of people haven't been and aren't in, might not ever be in, and that is having the amazing career that you've had, seeing animals from birth to this stage in their life.
Right.
And I guess that gives you this perspective that a lot of people wouldn't have, because they might have only been in the keeper industry or working with companion animals for 5 years, 10 years. That's really not potentially long enough to appreciate the gravity of what you're saying.
Yeah. It's a tough one, you go through work, like you said, working with animals from a very young age. You see them age, you see them needing more things. And you just want them to maintain the best quality of life that they can through their whole life. So we try to do that by anticipating needs and then being creative when we need to. So, I can give you examples of some animals that foundation has really paid off for us. So we had a male snow leopard named Rigel. And when he got older, we do life stage workups where we, actually anesthetize them and do a full workup that we couldn't do otherwise at certain stages. And so when he was older, in his teens, they found out during one of his regular exams that he had high blood pressure. And so the veterinarian said, well, we want to start him on a medication for that. But with this type of medication, the only way we'll know if we're on the accurate dose is to be able to take his blood pressure voluntarily when he's awake, not affected by anesthesia. And you have to be able to keep doing it as you're adjusting the medication. So for him, he was already trained for voluntary weights, injections, blood draws, and ultrasound. And so with that foundation of training, all we needed to do was introduce some new equipment and new sensations that he would feel. And so it only took us like 3 weeks to teach him to let us. What we did was we got a blood pressure cuff that you would normally use on a small child around their arm. And we have the snow leopard lay down and their tail backs up out of an opening, and we could wrap the blood pressure cuff around his tail and inflate it with it's a lot of pressure, to do a blood pressure reading. And then we were able to monitor that weekly as we made adjustments for his medication. So a quick pathway to that much needed behavior, because the medication started right away and we wanted to monitor. If he didn't have that foundation, that would have been several months instead of a few weeks to go from start to finish.
What's his name? Rigel? Am I saying it correct? Rigel. And Rigel had all of these foundation behaviors, and he understood how training worked, and he had high trust accounts, I would assume, to do all of these amazing behaviors that you've already mentioned. Does that mean that you incorporate blood pressure training now into other programs as a foundation, or did that change how you view that?
There are behaviors like that we do make foundation behaviors. We haven't done it with every cat at this point. So some of that turns into the individual, how much time and whatever things you're working on. The snow leopards that we have right now are not as old, but they're working on tail blood draws because that's a higher priority and needs to come first before the blood pressure. But we do look at some things like that to go, and that's how we progress, right? As we start out with a couple foundation behaviors, and then as we learn common things that happen to our animals, we might incorporate more. But because there is only so much training time in the day, some of those more complex things may not be trained until later in life, and an as-needed basis.
So that was number 2. What do you have for us, please, Debbie, as strategy number 3 for caring for and training our aging animals?
Okay, so I put down learn about common issues that can occur for your aging animals. So again, they age differently, each one, but there's a lot of things that are common to aging animals. So there might be pain issues, is very common for a lot of different reasons. A really important thing that can happen with aging animals specifically is cognitive decline. And so, of course, that's going to affect your training. Cognitive decline can come from natural aging. It can come as a side effect of some of the illnesses that they encounter. And it can also occur because of medications that we put them on to help them with the pain or other medical issues. So it can be natural medication or illness induced. There's a lot of things that will happen in a lot of species: kidney disease, cancer, arthritis. They're going to have a low appetite at times. So that's where you're looking at how you can reinforce them. And then if it's a social animal, sometimes what affects them is a loss of social status. And you're going to have to look at that in your training plan on how you can work with them and reinforce them and not cause any issues with them, being displaced by other animals in the social group. And then, of course, another one would be sensory decline. So as they age, they might experience loss of vision or loss of hearing. And that's definitely going to affect their participation at certain times and their comfort level. And they might become a little bit more people specific because of the sensory loss, because the trust is such a big deal at that point in time. That's really where that relationship comes into play, because an animal that's not 100% feeling well or is in decline, relationship's going to be important at the time that you need it the most.
Have you got any stories to share with us about when you've noticed sensory decline or cognitive decline in an animal when you're...
Yes. So we did have like a sheep that went completely blind in our barnyard. And so with her, she would have to shift to go with her social group each day so the staff could clean and find her way around a little bit to get with them. But usually they wanted to run out a bit faster than her. And so we noticed that in her movements from area to area, sadly, she was running into the fence or running into the gate and not able to find her way. And so we did a really, really simple training plan with her. And we just did a little stimulus pairing and went, I'm going to ring a bell. I'm going to give you food. I'm going to ring a bell. I'm going to give you food. Then I'm going to back up a step. I'm going to ring the bell. And she would take one step forward and we would give her the food. So what we ended up doing was, once she understand that the bells were an opportunity to food, we attached the bells to a feeding pan or dish, and we would shake the dish. She would eat. We would back up a couple steps, shake the dish. And that way we could walk backwards and she could follow the sound and be reinforced for following the sound. And then she learned to trust us, that she wasn't going to run into anything, that we were going to guide her through doorways or around objects as needed. So that was just a really simple behavior that made a big difference in her welfare and her confidence being able to move around.
And if you are looking after a sheep, or maybe you have a companion animal, maybe your dog, and you start to notice behaviors like the ones you described, bumping into things, or behaviors that we might hypothesize are due to a cognitive decline, these can be extremely stressful for us as carers. It's hard to watch animals that we know and love to start to decline in this way.
Right.
And I'm assuming that learning about what these issues are and having that knowledge can set you up to navigate a really challenging time as a carer for an animal. But do you have any other advice to give someone who's watching an animal that they care for and love start to really experience the significant shift at this life stage?
Yeah, I think it's look at what are they struggling with, and how can we change the environment and set everything up to help them have a more comfortable life. So after the AZK class that we taught, I had somebody contact me from another zoo and say that they had a blind cougar that was running into things in their holding area and was having trouble navigating. Well, of course, you can't have free contact with that animal. So you have to look at how can I change the environment for that animal, because I can't be in there with them and let them follow sound, and they need to navigate when I'm not there. So what I recommended to that person was to use things on the floor that the animal would be able to feel with his or her feet as it walked around, to kind of create a braille system of navigation for the animal. So things like you can use like non-slip strips, or you can use paver stones that you might use in your backyard as stepping stones. And so the animals can learn as they walk to feel the pathway for them that way. Right now I have a geriatric dog at home. And so she's got mostly her vision, but her biggest problem is that she has arthritis quite severely, and she's on anti-inflammatories, and she gets a little pain medication for that. But one of her favorite things is riding in the car and going to new places and walking around. And she loves scent enrichment, being able to smell and run around without a leash in the open space. So what I can't really lift her up in and out of the car because she's 74 pounds. She's not Phoebe. So what I've done with her is I have padded mats like you might use in your kitchen for people who are on their feet a lot. So when she jumps out of the car, when it's parked at my house, she's landing on padding that absorbs the shock. When I go to a park, instead of parking like perpendicular to the curb, I'll park parallel to the curb so that when she jumps out, it's less distance and she's jumping into grass and not onto concrete. And I can also carry the portable mats with me if I'm going to the vet or something and she has to hop out onto concrete. So I think it's really looking at what can I do as I'm seeing that behavior. I'm really watching behavior. My dog also is very spoiled, as every pet should be. And she is allowed up on the couch with me or anybody else who's at home. And my whole downstairs is tile floor. Well, your dog's feet don't get good traction on tile. So I got rubber backed carpets that I put next to the couch so that when she's getting up, and it's really just a climb, it's not a jump, but as she's pushing off or coming down up and off the couch, then her feet are not going to slide. So that helps her in that way.
So it sounds to me, if you're a listener of this show, and you might be like the keeper with was it jaguar? Did you say?
Sorry.
Well, cougar, a cougar.
Cougar, yeah.
The cougar. So you might have an animal and you're starting to observe these changes. Sounds to me like a thing that keeper needed was a team. Well, they needed that person to ask, and that needed that person to support. How important do you think for aging animals, for those of us who don't have the privilege of leaning on 48 years of experience, how important it is us to build a team to navigate this stuff? Because it's be really challenging to understand all of the issues that can arise and have the observation skills to notice specific little nuance changes and to brainstorm strategies that are effective. How important do you think that is?
I think it's really important because even at 48 years, I don't know everything, right? And I also like to rely on a team. I'm going to contact people in my group too and share experiences and ask for help. I think it's important to be able to admit that you don't know everything and that you want other people's help. I think also it gives that person a little bit of peace of mind to have that support behind them and to help make decisions as a team. And, there's a saying, what is it? None of us is as smart as all of us. So together, we're going to find solutions and bounce ideas back and forth, and we're going to implement, and then we're going to evaluate. So it gets back to that. There's inputs. What are we doing to improve it? And then we still have to observe the behavior and see if the outcome is what we were hoping it would be with the inputs we provided. And if we need to make more adjustments, we just keep adjusting.
We've got so far: be a good observer, have a whole life animal training plan, learn about common issues that can occur. Super excited to hear what strategy number 4 and 5 are.
All right. Well, this is something that we've been practicing here for many years as part of our wellness program. Is you have to have a holistic approach to planning and animal daily care, because every component of animal care and management affects every other component, right? So your nutrition, your medication, your enrichment, what time of day you shift your animals, like I said, with the polar bear. What is the environmental setup that you have for that animal? What does it need as it's aging? So again, setting up and make it easier for the animals to move around if you notice a problem. If you have a primate, it might be more handhold so that they can climb and access different areas more easily. And then your training, obviously, what time of day do you do your training? If that medication you're giving it is reducing pain, give the medication time to take effect. If the medication that you're using is causing cognitive confusion, then think about when they are the most alert, because that's when you're going to want to train new things. I did read somewhere that there was an actual scientific study done with dogs that showed that dogs can learn new behaviors, but it might take them a little bit longer, but then once they learn it, they're going to maintain it. So look at when is your animal most mentally aware? When are they in less pain? In other words, when are you going to set them up to succeed with the training? And how do I make them, or how do I provide them all of the opportunities they need for positive welfare when everything is looked at together? Because if you just look at it separate, it's hard to provide optimal welfare.
And I guess that's a challenge that keepers face to implement plans sometimes, is the challenge that we all face as animal trainers, as human beings, in all areas of our life, is there's only 24 hours in a day and we've only got set amount of resources. Any advice on how to best incorporate animal needs with regards to geriatric animals and adjusting your schedules for keepers who are feeling that they are stretched super thin and their schedules are creating barriers to actually setting up programs how they need to be set up?
Yeah, I mean, there are issues with that. You have to figure out how your day works. But if you figure out really what works best for the animal, in the long run, you're going to save time because they're going to be more successful and you're going to be able to get through your day quicker by planning what works best for the animal. A lot of it is communication. If you're a keeper, if it's your animal at home, you can do whatever you want. If you're a keeper in a zoo, communicating with your management and having their support to do what's best for the animals is important. And I think the question that you asked actually leads into like number 5, biggest strategy, and that is be compassionate and flexible with your aging animals. So having compassion and understanding how they're feeling and what they're going through, and what their competing motivators might be is really important. And then we have to be flexible in our criteria sometimes and our expectations from our animals. So with the polar bear, that wasn't shifting. When I first proposed that we feed her out on habitat as opposed to having her secure first thing in the morning, that wasn't well received in the beginning because the keepers had been taught that you always secure them first before you give them anything. And they were fearful that maybe the bear wouldn't secure if she was fed on habitat instead of securing. But when we got them to try it and they saw that being flexible and compassionate for what that animal was going for actually got them the results they wanted and saved them time because they weren't waiting for a long time. They just reorganized their day. So, if you want to work with animals and have that be your career, you have to learn to be flexible because behavior changes, animals change, expectations change. And we want to do what's best for the animal. And so that means we're the ones who need to be flexible for their benefit and well-being.
Being flexible can be hard.
Yes. And not everybody is good at being flexible. But when you give them the motivation or when they see the results with one animal and they're like, wow, look at these little changes we've done to be flexible with them, has made a positive welfare impact for that aging animal, then it's going to come more naturally the next time. It all kind of leads into, like, we talk a lot, in recent past about choice and control. And so by giving our animals a little bit more choice and a little bit more control, we're actually strengthening our relationship with them and providing better welfare for them.
And I can imagine for the keepers that were looking after the polar bear, and shout out to you keepers if you're listening to this episode, that the flexibility and behaviors that we can put under the umbrella of the label flexibility were reinforced. And it puts a deposit in the trust account for Debbie Marrin, who
Yes. Try this crazy idea.
And so we've got these strategies: be a good observer, have a whole life animal training plan, learn about common issues that can occur. You have to have a holistic approach to planning an animal daily care program, and be compatible. I wrote compatible. Be compatible and flexible. Compassionate.
Be compassionate.
I was like, that doesn't sound correct.
For those of you people who are very young and you haven't experienced, aging issues, or maybe you haven't been around people who have aging issues, it might be a little bit more difficult to put yourself in their place. But it's something that we should all be aware of and strive to learn more about. What is that animal going through? Talk to somebody who's older, and you'll learn, because they can verbalize what it's like and how they're feeling and that kind of stuff. So human and animals have a lot of similarities in aging issues.
So I'm gonna it's getting into or having a drone and flying up and having a look at the bigger picture. So all of these things you talked about, I am thinking require, as we've talked about, a really cohesive, strong team and network of people. And as you've mentioned multiple times, what's required is good communication. And I don't know if this was if you resonate with where my thoughts have gone with everything you've shared, but one of the big takeaways I've got from doing this episode with you now, Debbie, is communication is key with all of those 5 areas, with knowing that we need a network and a team, vet teams, we need experience, we need mentors, we need communities like the zoo communities you have over there in the States, and for us in different parts of the world, the communities that we've got in our regions, communication is required in all of those spaces. So,
Yes.
so there's going to be people listening to this who might resonate with all of this stuff, but be in a position where they want to suggest these changes to their management or those underneath them in terms of their organization structure. Maybe they're a manager, or they want to just suggest it to peers because they've listened to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. They've noticed something in one of their animals that needs to be discussed with the team, and they've brainstormed a strategy. Now their job becomes to communicate that to the stakeholders. What, in your 48 years of experience, what suggestions or what tips or what advice do you have to give to those listening to be an effective communicator so that ultimately we can care for aging animals and give them what they need?
I think you have to know your audience that you're trying to get support from. So, what is important to, like, if you're proposing something to your manager, what's important to them, and thinking about what questions or concerns they might have and trying to come up with the solutions before they ask the question. So, I've gone through that before. If the upper management is worried about resources and costs and saving time and safety, which we should all be concerned about, and if you can answer those questions when they ask, or say, let me get back to you if there's something you're concerned about, and then do your networking and get supporting information. So I'm not sure if everybody's aware, Sabrina Browndow and Sarah Chapman just finished editing a book on aging, care of aging animals in human care. I co-wrote the chapter with Sabrina on training for that. I'm not plugging myself. I don't get money for that. But, if you have resources like that, that shows you, here's scientific studies, here's experts in the field. There's also different papers out there that talk about the benefits of training animals and how really in the long run, you're saving the zoo money and time by investing early and maintaining all of these behaviors, because you're having healthy animals and less medical costs and staff that's happy at work and progressing and animals that are doing well. And, when people come to visit, if it's a zoo situation, they want to see animals that are being well cared for. If it's your pet at home, you, of course, want to do the best you can, and communicating with your vet. Think of your vet as part of your team. And I think in both situations, looking at, different new ways of treating animals and being open-minded to new therapies and treatments is really important.
I love that answer. I think that the question about what are the human learners reinforcers who we are wanting to get behavior change from is so valuable. But one thing that I really love about what you said, and I've found really powerful in the past, and I've just completely forgot about it, but I'm going to say it now anytime anyone asks me these questions, is to think about the risks and the challenges that your manager or whoever you're talking to are going to have, and solve them for them before you talk to them. And I imagine that does multiple things. That makes the receiver of the information go, okay, this isn't going to take up my resources. I don't have to put time or energy into thinking about this, if you've done a good job, that is, of thinking about the risks and coming up with solutions. But also, I imagine it puts huge deposits in trust accounts to say that this person is seeing things from my point of view, and they are willing to put in the work, and they've come to me with a well thought out proposal, idea, suggestion. That I think is really powerful.
Well, thanks. I mean, I found that very effective for me, wanting to do a lot of things where I know initially they're going to go, you want to do what? And, many years ago when I first started the first dolphin husbandry training program at Marine World, my immediate supervisor didn't think that we were going to be able to train all this stuff and maintain it in the beginning. But once we were allowed to start the program and he saw the benefits of it, then the support grows. So sometimes it just starts with one behavior and they see the success and then they're more supportive moving forward. And it really is, it kind of ties into safety for humans and animals, as we know, because, with our companion animals, if they're not trained to participate voluntarily, we can restrain them. And with some of the animals, here at the zoo too, a sheep or a bird, we might be able to restrain if we can't get the training done. But I can't restrain that snow leopard or that lion or that giraffe. And so voluntary participation and the resources to teach them to participate voluntarily is critical.
Debra, as we head to wrapping up this episode, in your words, can you remind the listeners, tell the listeners, what is at stake if we don't think about caring for aging animals in our care? What is at stake?
I think the stake is that your animals suffer. They don't have a positive state of well-being if you're not paying attention to the issues that they're having and doing your best. It doesn't mean that we have to be perfect, because nobody's perfect, but it just means that I am aware that you're having this cognitive issue or this physical issue or this health issue, and I'm going to do the best that I can to keep your state of well-being the best that it can be through your whole life. So we practice what we call a cradle to grave approach here at the zoo. We've taken on this responsibility of this young animal, and we're going to do the best we can for it through every life stage, not just the beginning of life when it's young and it's easy. And we want to respect the aging process and the needs of all of our animals.
And to wrap up, what do you have to share with the listeners of the show who might currently be caring for an aging animal, might have done so in the past with a single or multiple animals or many, depending on how long your career had been, how long you've been working with animals, and they might be reflecting on that with a little bit of anxiety or stress because of how it went and the lack of knowledge or the lack of resources. What do you want for the listeners of this show? What should their life look like in your mind in terms of caring for aging animals? I'm imagining that if we implemented the things you've talked about, and the journey doesn't stop here. You've mentioned this book coming out from Sabrina. You've mentioned some of the communities that you're involved with, Animal Training Academy, the ones in your region. So I'm by no means saying for the listener of the show, listen to this episode, and things are going to be great. It's just an approximation on your journey. But what do you want for the listeners of this show? How should they feel when they come into caring for an aging animal?
I want to say be kind to yourself. I think a lot of times people are, like you said, they're having anxiety about, have I done enough? Am I doing enough for this animal? And I feel like if you're asking yourself those questions, that animal, whether it's your personal companion or an animal you're working with professional, is very lucky to have you, because you are doing everything you can, the best you can for that animal's welfare. So be kind to yourself, use your support groups, and just keep learning and understand that, we all grow. We do what we know at the time. We do the best we can at the time. And then we keep learning. So don't beat yourself up for things in the past that made you feel like I didn't do enough. I've done that myself. I know how that feels. And it doesn't help your animals anymore. It doesn't help you to maintain what you're doing. So that's my advice. Be kind to yourself. Your animals are lucky to have you, because you're obviously a caring and compassionate person if those are the questions that you're asking yourself.
It's very great advice. We obviously want and are excited to have been able to host for you, the listener, Debbie Marrin on the show to help you build your knowledge and your skills in caring for the animals in your care. We don't want you to feel anxiety or stress or frustration in this space. They are naturally the course of being a human, but we want to empower you to have your biggest possible positive impact from cradle to the grave. Debbie, I'm sure there's people that are listening here that would love to know if they have questions. Are they able to reach out to you? Where can they do that? How can they do that?
You can post my email for them, and they can send me emails either through my zoo email or my personal email or whatever. I'll get those. Sometimes zoo emails end up in spam. So if you email me and you don't hear back in a few days, email again or email Ryan and say, I tried to contact Debbie and she ghosted me. I never do that. I respond to everybody. Always respond. So yeah, I'm happy to have discussions and be part of a support group if anybody has any questions.
Fantastic. And do you have a timeline on this exciting new text that you mentioned with in collaboration with Sabrina and Sarah Weber, was it?
Sarah Chapman.
Yeah. Sarah Chapman.
Yeah. So the book is, it was supposed to be out September in the mail or pre-order on Amazon, but we don't control the publishing company. So it's coming out in November. And the book is titled Optimal Well-Being of Aging Wild Animals in Human Care. And it's through Springer Publishers. And it's not an inexpensive book. It's really, I think, geared for animal professionals. But if you're somebody who really wants to learn more about aging animals, it transfers across all species, really, when you're talking about providing proper care. So it's a great resource for anybody. I also have a paper that I wrote with Dr. Krebs here at the zoo on just the aspects of training aging animals, some of the things that in detail for our training program and practices. And so I think there's a lot of resources out there, though. Specifically aging animals, I think, is just a new topic where we're progressing still, and we've got a lot to learn, but we've come a long, long way.
Is that paper that you mentioned, is that publicly available? That's just an internal document?
It's an internal document that was not published outside of the zoo. I wrote it with Dr. Krebs for staff here. So that's what I'm saying. Our staff has unlimited resources to the best of, my ability to keep providing them. So I wanted to give them in writing, here's a lot of information to think about when you're training your aging animals and why you're training now for a whole life plan for all of your animals. So I can email you that too, possibly, and you can share that somehow in the community.
Awesome. Well, Debbie, from myself and on behalf of everyone listening, a massive thank you today for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. It's truly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Could talk forever with you.
And thank you as well so much for listening. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. It's our hope today's conversation sparked inspiration and added some tools to your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every training challenge is an approximation towards becoming a better trainer. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our waitlist and be the first to know when our membership doors open again. There you'll find a supportive community of trainers just like you, working to make a positive difference in the lives of animals and humans alike. Until next time, keep honing your skills, Stay resilient, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.